Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're covering one of the most dramatic stories in tech right now, China blocking Meta's $2 billion acquisition of an AI startup called Manus. This isn't just a business deal gone wrong. It's a signal that the rules governing technology, capital, and sovereignty are being rewritten in real time. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Manus is, why Meta wanted it so badly, why China stepped in to stop it even after the deal was already done, and what this means for the future of global AI investment. Let's start with the big picture. On April 27, 2026, China's top economic planning authority, the National Development and Reform Commission, or NDRC, ordered Meta to reverse its completed acquisition of Manus, a Singapore-registered AI startup. The deal had already closed in January for somewhere between $2 and $2.5 billion. This is the first publicly documented case of China using its Foreign Investment Review framework to retroactively unwind a deal that was already finished. It changes everything about how cross-border tech M&A works. So what is Manus, and why did anyone pay $2 billion for it? Let me explain. Manus is what's called a general-purpose AI agent. While most AI tools you've heard of, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, respond to questions, Manus actually does things. Give it a single instruction, and it breaks it into dozens of steps, opens browsers, clicks through web pages, runs code, fills out forms, and completes complex tasks on your behalf, all without you guiding it along the way. Think of it as the difference between asking someone a question and handing them a project with a deadline. On the GAIA benchmark, the leading test for measuring AI agent capability, Manus scored 86.5% on standard tasks, compared to 74.3% for OpenAI's deep research. Even on the hardest tasks, Manus outperformed all competitors. Manus was built by a company called Butterfly Effect, founded in October 2022, 2 months before ChatGPT launched, by two Chinese entrepreneurs. CEO Xiao Hong started his career in Wuhan with government subsidies and rent-free office space provided by the local government. Chief scientist Ji Yichao had been building AI tools since high school and was backed by top Chinese venture firms. In 2023, they launched a browser plugin called Monica, which brought together multiple AI models in one interface. ByteDance offered to acquire them for $30 million in 2024. They said no, they had bigger plans. Now let's look at why Meta wanted Manus so badly. Meta has been the undisputed leader in open-source AI through its Llama model series. But as the AI race shifted from language models to autonomous agents, AI that can actually do things rather than just talk, Meta found itself behind. Microsoft, Google, and OpenAI had all launched agent products. Meta had nothing. With a 2026 capital budget of $135 billion, Meta chose speed over self-development. Instead of building an agent capability from scratch, they paid a premium to acquire one that already worked. $2 billion for a 110-person team is roughly $18 million per employee, a massive bet. The plan was to embed Manus's technology directly into Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, serving billions of users. Before the acquisition, Manus had already executed a careful restructuring strategy designed to avoid exactly the kind of regulatory scrutiny that eventually caught up with it. Between April and July 2025, the company moved its legal headquarters from China to Singapore, transferred all intellectual property to a new Singapore entity, let go of roughly 120 Chinese employees, relocated about 40 core engineers to Singapore physically, and shut down all Chinese social media accounts while blocking Chinese IP addresses from the global website. This strategy is called Singapore washing, making a Chinese company look like a Singaporean one on paper. It worked well enough to attract $75 million in funding, led by the American venture firm Benchmark, and it gave Meta the legal cover to call this a Singaporean acquisition. China's regulators did not accept the Singaporean framing. Let's look at the legal logic behind the block. On April 27, 2026, the NDRC invoked China's Foreign Investment Security Review Law, a framework modeled closely on America's CFI-US process, and concluded that the Manus deal represented a national security risk. The core legal argument rested on what regulators called the underlying substance principle. Regardless of where a company is registered, what matters is the origin of its technology, data, and talent. On all three counts, Manus was Chinese. The algorithms were designed by Chinese engineers in Beijing and Wuhan. The training data came from Chinese users. The founders were cultivated with Chinese government subsidies. The Singapore registration was a legal fiction. Regulators had the authority to order a retroactive unwind, and they used it. The clearest way to understand China's position is this single idea. Technology born in China belongs to China, regardless of what country's flag it flies under. The most powerful enforcement mechanism wasn't a fine or a court order. It was a passport. In March 2026, Chinese regulators summoned both founders, CEO Xiao Hong and chief scientist Ji Yichao, to Beijing for interrogation. Immediately after, the government placed exit bans on both men, preventing them from leaving Chinese territory. These two individuals are technically executives of a Singapore company and future employees of Meta. But they cannot leave China. No matter how much Meta paid, the people who built Manus and who were supposed to lead its integration into Meta's systems are physically trapped. A Singapore address cannot protect a Chinese citizen from a Chinese exit ban. There's a deeper reason China drew this line specifically around Meta. Meta is not a neutral commercial company in Beijing's view. Its open-source llama models are being actively distributed to U.S. Department of Defense agencies and military partners in the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. Meta has formed close partnerships with NDRC, a U.S. defense technology company that builds autonomous weapon systems. From China's perspective, allowing Manus's agentic AI technology, developed with Chinese government support and trained on Chinese data, to flow into an organization that also supplies the U.S. military is not a business transaction. It's a national security transfer. The Manus block is, in part, China's answer to America's own technology export controls. Now let's look at why unwinding this deal is almost impossible in practice. Reversing a $2 billion deal that already closed raises three nearly unsolvable problems. First, the money has already been distributed. $2 billion was paid out to Manus investors, including Chinese-backed funds like Tencent and Zhen Fund, but also American firm Benchmark, headquartered in California. The Chinese and Asian investors may cooperate with an unwind order. Benchmark has no legal or financial reason to give back cash it already received. Second, the technology has already been integrated. Since January, Meta's engineering teams have been merging Manus's code into Meta's platforms. Separating what belonged to Manus from what now belongs to Meta is technically close to impossible. Third, the workforce is already absorbed. The roughly 100 Manus engineers relocated to Meta's Singapore office and have been working as Meta employees. Forcing them back into a standalone company they no longer work for requires undoing employment contracts and raises significant labor law issues. Despite all of this, the deal's consequences reach far beyond Meta and Manus. The first major consequence is that cross-border AI acquisitions will now cost dramatically more to execute safely. Every future buyer will need to investigate not just where a target company is registered today, but where its technology was invented, who invented it, what government subsidies funded their early careers, and whether those governments can claim jurisdiction over the technology regardless of corporate structure. Lawyers and M&A advisors will now insist on simultaneous approval from both CFIUS in the US and the NDRC in China before closing. Deals will take longer, cost more to execute, and require much larger risk buffers built into the price. The era of fast cross-border AI acquisitions is over. The second consequence is that Singapore washing is finished as a strategy. Chinese founders looking to raise international capital and eventually sell to Western acquirers used Singapore as a neutral hub precisely because it stood outside both US and Chinese regulatory reach. China has now established that it doesn't care where you incorporated. It cares where your technology came from and where your passport was issued. The third consequence is capital bifurcation. Investors now treat any technology with Chinese origins as carrying a deep regulatory risk that cannot be papered over. The result will be a clean split between dollar-denominated Western AI capital and yuan-denominated Chinese AI capital, with no meaningful bridge between them. Global AI talent exchange and cross-pollination of ideas will suffer. Finally, the timing of this move was not accidental. China's NDRC issued its block just weeks before a scheduled US-China summit in Beijing in May 2026. The message to American negotiators is deliberate. The US has CFIUS to block Chinese investments in American technology. China now has its own mirror mechanism, and it's willing to use it retroactively against already closed deals in the middle of negotiations. The Manus block gives Beijing significant leverage. America's technology companies now know that any acquisition of China-linked AI talent carries the risk of being ordered to unwind after the fact. So here is where things stand. A $2 billion deal was closed, celebrated, and then ordered reversed. Not because it violated the law at the time it was signed, but because China decided after the fact that the technology was too strategically important to let go. The era of capital flowing freely across borders to acquire AI talent is over. National governments are drawing lines around their most valuable technology assets, and they are enforcing those lines through exit bans, retroactive reviews, and export control lists that cover algorithms themselves. The age of sovereign AI has arrived, and the Manus deal is its opening shot. That's it for today. See you in the next one.